Welcome back to Thoughts from a Bookworm. I'm Abigail Grace. Today we are talking about a brand new series, well, not brand new to the publishing world, but brand new to this channel, which is The Inheritance Games. I kind of discovered this series accidentally. I went through a random phase about a year ago where I was obsessed with buying Fairy Loot books. Like, it didn't matter if I had read them before or if they were any good. I just really liked the Fairy Loot edition of books because they were super pretty. Kind of since gotten over that phase because, well, yes, they're very pretty, they're very rare, they're hard to find, they're not the best quality. Anyway, I found the Inheritance Games online on Poshmark, stumbled across them kind of, like I said, accidentally, and just thought they were super pretty. So I did a quick, Google search on the series, on what they were about, and it was kind of intriguing. So I thought, okay, I'll get them and give them a try and stuff. And I actually really liked them. Like, these books, the first book, hooked me right away, which I'm a reader, I'm a bookworm, I love reading, I love most books, but even then, most of the time, it takes me like a chapter or two to get into it, even a couple pages. This book, like from the beginning, really grabbed me, and one of the things that I liked about it is that the chapters themselves are very short. Like, seriously, some chapters will be like 2 or 3 paragraphs, and like that's a chapter. So I like it because it's not super intimidating. I feel like a lot of books, like what's popular right now, is having chapters that are like 10 plus pages. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but just for me personally, that's just kind of like, I don't know if it's just the way that like my brain works or what, but it's like if I start a chapter, I have to finish it in that sitting, or I like to finish it in that sitting. So if I have like 5-10 minutes here or there, I don't necessarily have the time to finish a 10-page chapter, but I can read 5 chapters if each chapter is only like 3-4 paragraphs. So I really like that. It is in first person, which I'm, again, not really a fan of first person books, but I liked this. I feel like the author had a really good style of writing and of making it in first person to where it wasn't like, one of the things that I don't like about first person is I feel like every single first person author has the exact same voice. Like Katniss from the Hunger Games, Tris from Divergent. What's another like every single first person book I've read could be the same person in different settings, if that makes sense. But this series, I didn't feel like that. Avery Kylie Grahams genuinely felt like a whole new character, and I really like that. It was very, very cool. So the setting of the book is that Avery Kylie Grahams is a nobody from nowhere. She is mysteriously one day just left $46.2 billion by Texas billionaire Tobias Hawthorne, who she has never met, she's never heard of. Tobias Hawthorne has 2 daughters and 4 grandsons who were like obviously presumed to be left the majority of it. The second oldest grandson, Grayson Davenport Hawthorne, was like the heir apparent because the oldest grandson like had no interest in inheriting. So Grayson was the one who had been like being raised, being bred, being conditioned to inherit all this money, to be working at these charity firms and stuff like that. But randomly, Avery is left all this money, and they're not cut out entirely, but they're given like $100,000 each. Like, they're not given a lot of money for a $46.2 billion estate. So everybody right away assumes, oh, Avery is related to Tobias Hawthorne. She's his long-lost daughter, his long-lost granddaughter. Grayson assumes that she manipulated him at some point somehow. There's just all this speculation, but nobody knows what's going on. So Tobias Hawthorne is really big on mysteries, on puzzles, on riddles, on solving stuff. Like, he raised his grandsons because each of their fathers, they all 4 have different fathers. They have the same mother, different fathers. All 4 of them were basically raised by him. So he's, like I said, super into puzzles and riddles and games and word challenges and thinking outside the box, stuff like that. So they all grew up like that. So Jameson, the third boy, puts together, okay, something's going on here. Our grandfather's dead. He left us nothing but Avery. So Avery, he figures, is a puzzle. She's a mystery. She's a riddle. They have to figure out what's going on with her, and then that will give them the answer or whatever. Avery has absolutely no idea what's going on. She and her half-sister Libby move to Hawthorne House because one of the contingencies is that Avery has to live at Hawthorne House for an entire year 3 days after the will is read. So the will is read, she has 3 days to like move, and then she has to live at Hawthorne House for an entire year, which is in a different state. She's from Newcastle, Connecticut. I think it was Connecticut. It's either Connecticut or Colorado. I think it's Connecticut. And she moves to Texas. I don't honestly know if we're told what city in Texas now that I'm thinking about it, but it's somewhere in Texas. So she moves into Hawthorne House. She goes to a new school, and it's just riddles. Each of the 4 grandsons and Avery were left letters from the dead Tobias Hawthorne with different things in it. Avery says, "I'm sorry." Xander's, we don't find out what his says until very later, which we also find out that Xander was kind of in on all this from the beginning. Grayson is left a series of like proverbs that Avery and Jameson kind of work out. Okay, he's telling us something, so there's clues hidden all over the house that they didn't even realize were clues. So it's just such a fun book to read. And it was one of those books where like, if it had been it was just such a perfect, the author did such a good job at keeping the balance between it being complicated and complex and evident that she had planned this out and had worked out these riddles and tricks in her own mind, and it not being lost on the reader. I feel like that would be super easy to do for you as an author, to like map all this stuff out, have all these mysteries, these riddles, these problems, have your characters learn about it, but the readers not really know what's going on or how the characters came to those conclusions. And I didn't really get lost in that regard. It does get confusing, the family tree, that whole thing. And as the series goes on, it just gets progressively more confusing because Avery's not actually related to the Hawthorne brothers. She thinks they are, or they all think they're like distant cousins or something, but they're not. Then in the second book, Avery thinks that her real dad isn't her real dad, that she's actually Tobias Hawthorne's adopted son's daughter. It's just the family tree got very confusing, but it didn't really get confusing until book 2. So book 1 was actually fine as far as the family tree goes, because it comes out, oh, Avery is not Tobias Hawthorne's, she's not related to him like by blood. It does come out at the very end that the homeless man who Avery had been like spending time with, kind of adopted, like saved from being arrested, was the dead billionaire's adopted son, Toby. So there is also some tension. I saw a picture that somebody had posted. I don't know if it was on Instagram or Pinterest or what, but I guess at Barnes & Noble, like the catch for book 1 was like, he's a 10, but so is his brother. So there's tension, like a love triangle-esque thing. Everybody comes upstairs as soon as I start filming. So there's a little bit of tension between Avery and Grayson initially, because like I said, Grayson, all these names are so similar and they're so long. Grayson assumes that Avery cheated his grandfather, manipulated him, convinced him somehow to leave her this money. So he's very cold to Avery. Avery and Jameson kind of click right away over their desire to figure this out. As they both progress, Avery she doesn't really start to like develop serious feelings for Jameson. She's like attracted to him, and like they kiss at least once in book 1. I can't remember if they actually kiss a second time. But it's just kind of like a attraction, but she knows he's not interested in her because she knows he sees her as a puzzle and not as like a person at this point. There's a couple attempts on Avery's life, one of them from her biological father, who's like trying to cash in and wants to get in on everything, and he hasn't been there for Avery's life, so has no soft spot for him, and he's trying to get at her through Libby, who feels bad, and it's just, there's just a lot of tension. But the love triangle I'm also not a huge fan of love triangles, but this love triangle felt very, I don't want to say like organic, because I don't really think love triangles are organic, but it felt very non-offensive. Like it was very subtle. Like there was obvious tension, not sexual tension, but just tension between Avery and Grayson. And then there was tension between Avery and Jameson because it's all one side. It's from Avery's point of view. So all we see is Avery's, like, she's attracted to Jameson. She thinks she likes him. But then they kiss, and he's like, oh, you're so special. I knew there was a reason my grandfather left everything to you. We're so close to figuring it out. So there's that kind of thing. And honestly, in book 1, I wasn't rooting for Grayson or James. Like, I was cool with either one of them. I really didn't have a preference. I ended up having a preference in book 2. We'll talk about that next week. There's also some tension between Nash, the older brother, Avery's now lawyer, Elisa, and Avery's sister, Libby. Because apparently Elisa and Nash were engaged once at one point. Nash is now kind of starting to show he's kind of attracted to Libby, who's like gothic, Avery calls her a gothic beam of sunshine, which I thought was really funny. I don't personally have any friends who are like goth or into that kind of stuff, but I've like seen people, and I don't equate gothic people to being bright and cheery and fun, and Libby is, so that there's that cute dynamic of Libby, and then Libby and Nash kind of having this mutual attraction to each other, and Nash is like a diehard, Texas cowboy. He's got an accent, he wears a cowboy hat, he rides a motorcycle, so it was like, talk about opposites attracting. The book ends with Avery finding out that Harry, her homeless man from Connecticut, is Toby, who is Tobias Hawthorne's presumed to be dead son, who Avery now connects. Oh my gosh, he's not actually dead. Even Sky, the boys' moms, were saying like, oh, Toby disappeared. His body was never found. Like, we don't know for sure that he's dead. So that it makes Avery automatically assume, okay, something's going on. Tobias Hawthorne sought me out specifically. That's how the first book ends. It ends somewhat on a cliffhanger, but not like an offensive cliffhanger. It's really fun to read about like a teenager being thrust into this world of just having like basically unlimited money. She's got private jets. There was a really fun makeover scene. I really do like makeover scenes, especially in books where it's like being described to you versus like a movie where you're just kind of watching it. Books, it has a deeper element because like you get to read about what's happening. Avery's picking out her style, she's getting her hair cut, like all that kind of stuff was super fun. She's going to this new prep school with her cute little plaid skirt and maroon jacket. She owns a football team. Like, it was just very fun. It was just a fun read, and I just really, really liked this book. So that's where we're going to end today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because next week we are going to be talking about the Hawthorne Legacy.